Right. Well, welcome everybody.
Okay.
Welcome to this month's webinar. And today we're going to talk about how to optimize your website. It's not optimization for SEO purposes, it's optimization for performance. And we'll meet our all-star panel. We have Audrey Glover Ditcher and Adam Kozlov in just a couple minutes. But first, I'm going to talk about what people are challenged with, like what's up against it if you're looking at a new website design. So the first challenge is that you have about 2.3 seconds when a woman comes to your website. Men are a little slower, where they'll decide whether or not your website has what they're looking for. And it's really, really quick. And so your website has to perform incredibly quickly in today's environment. The second thing is most websites have a 98.5% fail rate. If you think about it, websites, especially in the old days, people filled out your forms 1 to 2% of the time, the contact us form. So in terms of design and what we're going to go through today, your website has to perform incredibly quickly to generate calls, form fills, and chats, the three main conversion points. And then the third mistake that a lot of people make, or the biggest challenge, is that websites are designed on these massive Macs that designers have, beautiful, almost like TV or movie screens, right? And the reality is that most people are looking, with a mid-level phone, looking at your website on a phone. So most people design the website in the wrong environment. You've got to be super sensitive to that mobile environment. And last but certainly not least, your website's got to be easy to read. It's got to be compliant. It's got to be ADA compliant. And this is Audrey's area of expertise, or one of her areas of expertise. And she'll be talking to us about how to make it accessible and available to people with disabilities, as well as avoiding any ADA compliance issues. So without further ado, let's talk about the opportunity. How do we turn that around? The first thing is you've got to have an awesome brand message. You've got to explain who you are, what you stand for. So that's one of the most important things, one of the most important jobs for your website. Get really great engagement and get people to understand who you are. This is a beautiful new website we're about to bring live. The second thing, you need super high performance. So we're going to talk today about how you get your website to generate incredible results, a lot of calls, a lot of clicks, a lot of chats, and a lot of form fills. And most importantly, we need conversion. We need cases. So that's what we're going to cover off today. So our agenda, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then we'll go into the 5 core strategies for websites that work. And then I'll introduce Adam, who's an awesome copywriter, and he's going to talk about why content doesn't need to be suffering. And Audrey, as I mentioned, is going to talk about compliance. And then the 3 of us will take some questions, and we'll try and do all this in about an hour. So my background, I come from Winnipeg, Canada, and moved to the United States 20 years ago, formed my company 10 Golden Rules in 2003. Google was still in beta. Mark Zuckerberg was still in high school. And so for 19 years, we've been helping people build great websites, develop awesome SEO campaigns, pay-per-click, social media. And we've been working with lawyers for about 17 of those 19 years. And we decided 4 or 5 years ago, we're going all in with lawyers. So our expertise is internet marketing for law firms. So let me touch on the 5 core strategies for website design. And the first thing is that new websites work. And this might sound kind of obvious, but this was our client's old website. It looks even more dated now that I look back on it. And this is a beautiful new design with a very contemporary, large graphic. The Stewarts look great, father and son. And then when we look at the numbers are awesome. The bounce rate is down 43%. So the percentage of people who came to the website and left. The pages per session's up, the session duration's up, but most importantly, we're getting a 200% improvement on goal conversions. And I'm going to keep touching on this: calls, chats, and form fills. And really awesome overall. The percentage is up 200%, and the goals are up 188%. Let's look at this from another perspective with a landing page. Now, different people use the term differently. We generally refer to a landing page as a page you use in a paid advertising campaign, a paid Google campaign, a paid social media campaign, where we can bring people to a specific page. So here, this was the original page, and this was the new page. We call this A/B testing, and we actually did a lot of work in analyzing the traffic and the eyeballs as people came to these pages with a click tracking software. So we see version A, first variant, no bullets, 1.187% conversion. And that's what I was talking about before, with a 98.5 fail rate. And the new design's done incredibly well with over an 8% conversion. And that the software is telling us there's a 100% likelihood that version B will always beat version A. But we don't give up there. We did a bunch of the eye tracking testing and mouse tracking, and we went with version B versus version C. Easy for me to say, right? And we got version B up to 9.5%, and then version C to 13.56% conversion. So the first principle is that new websites work, new designs work, lots of testing, lots of analysis on what's working and where the mouse and the eyeballs are going can make significant improvements. Now, when I come to a new design project, or when I'm taking my team in training through a new design project, I can still consider this book, which is over 10 years old. I interviewed Steve Krug on the 10 Golden Rules Internet Marketing podcast. I still consider this book the standard. And, really, if you don't go past the cover, you've learned a lot about website design. And Steve Krug's basic principle, don't make me think. It's really clear if this was a website, like what he wants you to do. Click the orange button. It looks like a button. The mouse looks clickable. And that's super clear. And really, you've got to think about your website from that perspective. Make it very, very simple what you want people to do. And, if you really want to get into web design, I recommend the book. Some of the chapters, and Adam will touch on this, omit needless words. So that's straight from the copy standpoint. And then from the design perspective, we think people, read the top section, then read the left section, then read this column and this column. But what really happens is people sort of go all over the place. And there's really different kinds of mentalities that people take to web design. And the biggest problem I've seen, being in, hundreds of boardrooms, figuratively and literally, over the past 20 years with this company, and prior to that in my corporate career, is that we can't design for the hippo. Now, the hippo, according to Avinash Kaushik, Google's analytics evangelist, he calls the hippo the highest paid person's opinion. And I can't tell you how many times the hippo has sent a project scurrying off in the wrong direction. Because when the hippo says, you don't need lots of copy on the website, I never read the copy on the website. Well, I'm sorry, Google reads the copy on the website. We need 600, 800, 1,000 words of copy in order to tell the search engines what this page is all about. We simply need content for SEO, for search engine optimization. That's been the rule for over 10 years, and it's still the rule today. And, just because the hippo doesn't watch video, lots of people like to watch video. Matter of fact, some people will search out a video on a website because that's the way they consume content. That's what they're looking for on a website. And a video like this, a hero video that tells you about the company, about the firm. I also like to call it a why video, why they do what they do. And here's some testimonials in this video. Those are very, very powerful for the folks who like to watch video, and for people who want to learn a little bit more than just, that quick scan of the website. Oh, and guess what? A lot of people like to chat. This is the Intaker chat. We're testing this on our site as well, and it's an artificial intelligence chatbot. But from a broad perspective, my quick explanation of chat: about 5 years ago, chat didn't work very well. You'd go on a website, you'd start a chat, and you'd be waiting eons. You could hear the crickets before they got back to you. And if they got back to you, they sent you a link to the page you'd already been on and were dissatisfied with the information. But chat's improved tremendously. I mean, this artificial intelligence chat gets smarter every time people use it. We also use a couple chats in the legal industry that are manned by people, and they're trained to understand what people are going through and turn those opportunities into leads. Basically, get them into get the qualified opportunities into the hands of a lawyer. Now, from the consumer's perspective, 5 years ago, chat didn't work. Today, chat almost always works when you go to a website. So if your perception is that it's still like the 5-year-old chat and the 5-year-old consumer response, or your response as a consumer, it's really changed, and people actually like to chat. Think about the last few years as people have been, at home with, 2 or 3 kids, working, doing their schoolwork by live streaming, and your spouse is also streaming their meetings. I mean, nobody really wanted to pick up the phone because there's so much going on in the house, and people don't want to give you an email because they're afraid of spam. So a lot of people choose to chat. In particular, what if you're in line at a bank? You're not calling the firm and you're not going to fill out the form, but you'd like to find out if they handle your type of case. So chat is incredibly powerful, and we see that it improves conversion 15 to 20%. Now, in terms of the website design, there's some conventions or best practices that we recommend. The first thing is, a lot of the new websites today have a big hero image. And, if you don't do that, like if you go back to the old website I showed you versus the new website with the hero image, it just looks a little bit dated. Now, is that the end of the world? No. Will people not engage with the website? No, absolutely. If they're recommended, they're still going to get in touch with you. But just even if it's subconsciously, they're going to feel like the website's not contemporary, and thereby your brand is not up to date. And there's just, there's like a subtlety to that that could hurt you. The second thing is, you've got to design for mobile, and your website's got to be clean. It's got to work incredibly well in the mobile environment. This is called the hamburger menu, and people are now very familiar with that as a way to navigate a mobile website. The other thing to keep in mind when you're designing your website is that the long scroll on a website is part of the mobile experience, and everybody's very familiar with that. So you want to design multiple, scrolls and answer multiple questions. And a lot of times, bounce rate is the measure we talked about earlier, where the percentage of people who don't go to a second page on a website. Now, in the old days, we just used to have the homepage. And if people didn't go to a second page to learn more about our firm, or to see the attorneys, or to see our case studies, the website had failed because people didn't go to a second page. But now you can get all the information by scrolling. So you want to design to have all the information, to have case studies, testimonials, practice areas, and information about your firm as you scroll down the website. A couple more best practices or conventions. The term convention is like when you go up to a door handle and you turn it to the right. If someone installed it backwards and you turn it to the left, you kind of bang into the door. So these are conventions or best practices. You always want the logo in that top left position. You want to accommodate the 3-second rule. So I said earlier that women decide within about 2.3 seconds if the website has what they're looking for. Men take just over 3 seconds to make that decision before they hit the back button. So how can you communicate to people who you are and what you do? So one of the things is the slogan. We changed our slogan to say exactly what we do: internet marketing for law firms. This is actually a scrolling bit of information that acts as our headline, and it talks about some of the different services we offer. And then the graphic is going to be part of that communication. So within 2.3 seconds for women and a little bit longer for men, you've got to communicate who you are and what you do super clearly. So when people come to the website, they know if you might have what they're looking for. And that's a might, because now they're just going to dig a little deeper. They're going to scroll down the page, but you've got to get past that first decision marker before they hit the back button. We always want to have the phone number in the top right, and we always want to have the phone number locked in on a mobile site, particularly for single incident law firms. That's the standard, that's the convention, that's where we look for it as a consumer. And you see here we have the little phone icon, we have a different color. It really stands out on the page. So if people want to call, we're encouraging them to make that call. Now, the reason why I'm so focused on the phone calls is because typically phone calls convert about 25% of the time. A chat will convert to a client somewhere between 10 and 15% of the time. And if people fill out the form and by the time you get back to them, they've already talked to another law firm, typically those form fills convert 4 to 6% of the time. So we're going to be super focused in our website design and all of our online interaction to make sure we get those phone calls. The navigation typically is going to go on the top of the website. It's become sort of a standard or a convention. As I mentioned before, we definitely want to have chat. Chat's going to increase conversion. Okay. Phone calls are better than chats, but having chat is going to get you those opportunities where people can't call or they don't want to call. We also have a UVP on our website, a unique value proposition, 10 golden rules. Golden rule number 3 is to create a UVP. And one of the things we realized when people came to a website called 10 Golden Rules, they wanted to see the 10 Golden Rules, and everybody was going to the page with the 10 Golden Rules. So we've got that free and available on the website. And then finally, you want to have your site map and your navigation at the very bottom of the website. Again, that's a standard or a convention. So without further ado, Adam's going to teach us a little bit about the content, the copy, the writing on the website. Some fun things about Adam: he was almost a chess master. He was almost an opera singer, and he toured the globe. He'll tell you a little bit more about singing in a castle in the Alps and how he almost died on the top of a volcano. Some of the more standard stuff: he graduated from Yale University, worked on the show Spaceballs with Mel Brooks, and really today he's a copywriter, mostly for law firms. And he's great, he's awesome, and he's interesting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to him, and he is going to share his screen if all goes well.
I will share my screen here. Thank you for that introduction. That was a really interesting presentation. I feel like I need to take notes. I mean, the thing I didn't realize, like, that phone converts way more than the form fills. It makes a lot of sense, actually. Anyway, well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to try to catch. So I'm, as James mentioned, I'm a content writer who basically, I'm a technical founder. I created a company called Virtuoso Content, and we have about 60 writers now, working on hundreds of different firms all over the nation and some international. And I'm going to try and talk a little bit about content in the context of the web design, but it's going to be less quantitative and more kind of like geared towards creating an epiphany about how to deal with content. So, one thing I've discovered is that being involved in so many content projects as an editor, as a writer, as a recipient of content, is that there's a lot of suffering involved. And so I'm going to talk about what that means and kind of how that might help you to create the stuff for your website in a way that's going to be less brutal. I'm terrible at PowerPoint. I just created this last night. I hope
very down at the bottom, the thing that looks like a little monitor.
Yeah.
At the very bottom.
Okay.
Keep going down. Yeah. Look, it's the final one before the plus minus bar.
Before the plus minus bar.
Click on that.
I don't even know what you're talking about. This.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
This?
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh my God. Okay. Nice. So thank you. I'm not PowerPoint conversant, so I'm just going to talk a little bit. I don't want to race through this, but I've got trying to cover a lot within a little bit of time. So kind of why bother with content in the first place? I mean, as Jay touched on it for a little bit, there's a lot of obviously you can go on Google. Why do I need content for my website? I'm a lawyer. I want to run my business. Like, this seems tangential. Well, as Jay said, SEO search, in order for the search engines to find you, you need to publish content. And, to promote yourself on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're going to do, you have to have some message. And, like it or not, we're in a war of attrition. There's many other firms competing for eyeballs. And the way they're doing it is they're throwing out content. So you have to have some content in some capacity. It's a great way to, the goal of marketing in one way is to make selling superfluous by getting people to know, like, and trust you. And it's a great way where you can kind of educate people who don't know you or your firm to be like, to understand the value of your, UVP and why they should work with you in particular. It's very useful to create leads and to generate conversions, because if you have the right kind of content, and as Jay's mentioning, the A/B testing, you can convert more people, which leads to better leads, which leads to a more profitable firm. And then also, content is unique in terms of web marketing in that it can lead to thought leadership. Like, you can place your mark on the world in a way that you can't with, like, I don't know, in video you can too. Video is a kind of content, but it gives you a chance to establish your authority in a particular domain, and do so in a way that's really kind of humane, right? You're reaching out to someone who's got a problem and you're beginning to solve their problem for them without necessarily giving you the whole answer. And by doing so, you establish yourself as credible in the eyes of prospects, but also, potentially even more importantly, in the eyes of colleagues who could refer people to you. So if you're an estate planning lawyer and you write an amazing piece on, like, I don't know, some kind of new trust, so a financial planner might be like, wow, this woman understands this thing really well. Maybe I can refer people to her. So it's a great way to kind of create these long, kind of leave these like presence on the internet, which can pay off months or even years later. And it's a nice, and you can create this durable sort of moat. And then, yeah, again, your marketing can last for ages. Like, a lot of my clients will say, like, hey, I got a new client from somebody who read a post that you wrote in 2016. And so there's that kind of thing where you have this legacy that not only helps your SEO over time, but also helps with it creates this kind of durable map for you. Okay, so then what stops you from making this content and having all these benefits? Well, it's very difficult. This is very difficult to keep up the cadence required. It's you might have like a spurt of momentum, but you're going to fall off. It can be a money pit. Content is expensive, and you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars, just like with any kind of internet marketing thing. And if you're not careful, it can just blow up. It's a great way to burn billable hours. I mean, if you're earning $400 an hour, $300 an hour doing legal work, and now you're like spending 5 hours a week writing your blog, I mean, you're burning thousands of dollars a week on that. And is that useful? Another thing is, this is a really important point. My business mentor mentioned this: no points for busy. You don't get points in business for being busy. It's results and effectiveness. But with content in particular, it's easy to feel like, oh, I'm typing this thing, I'm typing this piece, this is really great. And yet, what is it getting? How is it adding to your bottom line, or even how is it adding to your sense of authority in the space? You can really, really spin your wheels. It's also very difficult to do it yourself, or outsource. So there's a lot of, it seems like you should be able to get it done, but it's often much harder than you think. There's a lot of shouting into the void, and doing a bad job is often worse than doing nothing at all. Having a terrible blog, having a blog that starts and having stuff like inaccurate or just full of jargon, it can actually be more harmful than just having a blank slate. So I consider all these things forms of, I mean, I try to do a blind man and the elephant graphic here. I can't really do PowerPoint. So, but the point is, all these little things, these kind of obstacles, I consider forms of suffering. And so suffering's bad because, running a business is hard, running a law firm is hard, you're dealing with clients, and I think in the legal space, there's a lot of sense of suffering. And so I think if you want to have the benefits of content, which are numerous, you have to think about, like, well, what can I do to relieve these stresses? And I'm just going to talk a little. I don't mean to erase through, but I know we have limited time, so I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of background of like why I'm talking about this or who I am. As Jay mentioned, I'm not a lawyer. I have a degree in science from Yale. I've had a lot of different things I've done. I've written for television. Excuse me, and I'm just getting over a cold. And I was a speaker at a low carb conference, and in this Swedish version of the PowerPoint I found. But I've done a lot of things, and basically, I'm a freelance writer a technical founder who's created my own company, and I have a whole bunch of writers now, and our whole mission is content without suffering. And kind of discovered this over time because a lot of lawyers and a lot of other clients who are not in the legal space encounter the same kind of elephant that I talked about, which is like, I want to get the benefits of this, but it's all harder than I think. And how am I supposed to deal with it? And so I'm going to give you some general principles. Obviously, this is short, so I can't this is not going to be like a comprehensive list, but these are the things that I found that are very useful if you keep them in mind. Number one is, and to know thyself. Like, what is the purpose of what you're doing? I think, the purpose question is always very useful in business, but like, do understanding what it is that you're doing is going to be a really good way, a sieve to figure out like, what do you not need to do? Because a lot of things in content you don't need to do, or you can do later, and part of that is it's avoiding going down all these rabbit holes, is being like, well, why am I doing this? And constantly asking that question, why? And a really good question and this is the way to make the sieve, is to ask yourself, if I had to hand over this content process to somebody else I don't know, somebody in my firm or a random consultant, what is the list of things I'd say? You have to do this. You can't do this. You should do this. I would love it if you could do this. So for instance, don't spend beyond this much money. I want this many conversions. I don't, don't write about don't have this tone of voice when you write in my voice. Having that level, having that like really bullet point list, it could take you literally 5 minutes to write, will make it so that you will avoid so many of these rabbit holes. Like for instance, you're like, look, I don't want to spend more than 2 hours of my time a week on whatever I'm doing with my content. It will prevent you from spending your Saturday afternoons writing blog posts if that's like, not in your list of principles. So understand, know thyself. Next one is know the rules of the game you're playing. So it's related, but like, having a kind of understanding of like, how do you want your content to be? And in Virtuoso, we have these 5 standards I use as a sieve for every piece of content we create. And it's very helpful because it's a shorthand. So I say, we have to omit fluff. We want to make sure every word counts. We want to write with grace. Things have to have a nice cadence and rhythm. We have to deliver on the promise of the assignment, stick to, the knitting. What is it saying? What's the goal? We have to make sure we fulfill it. Pay attention to cause and effect. Does the thing make sense? A lot of content, even for lawyers, you can meander, you have like clause upon clause, and you're like, what am I actually talking about? So you have to make sure that the piece makes sense, and then respect the reader. Imagine handing this to somebody you love or care about. Would they feel like insulted, or would they be embarrassed, or you'd be like, yeah, this is great, I'm really happy I wrote this. So my point is, I'm not saying you have to use those standards, but pick standards for your writing. So you have standards for what it means to the purpose of your general writing, and then you have standards for the actual writing itself. And now you're gonna, if you just have do those 2 things, and it will literally 5-10 minutes for each one. Now you're gonna avoid so much agony. Another thing is, habits are better than goals. I mean, I love a good goal, but this is a common idea here in the world of internet marketing and elsewhere. But like, you need to, the way to make to succeed in this incredibly competitive space is endurance. So I've seen so many people, they'll buy, or they'll do a huge content build and then stop, or you have to find something that's sustainable for you and that you can live with, and it's not going to kill you. So enough of that. I'm trying to get through, so I'm not going to take up too much time. So, part 4 is you have to get the right people doing the right place. There's many people who could do the content. You could do it yourself. You could find another lawyer. You could do someone in-house, like your marketing director. You could hire an outside freelancer. You can have an outside company do it, or you can opt to do nothing. These are all viable options, but it's kind of like part of understanding how to deal with this is like, who is in charge and what are they doing? So you have your principles, you have your standards, and you have to find the right people. And I would say it really shouldn't be you. It can be you in the short term, but ultimately, if you're running a firm, you're doing legal stuff, like it's, you want to have quality control, absolutely, but you shouldn't be the one typing out like, 15 pages a month. And lastly, don't go it alone. There's a lot of great resources. I mean, out there, great free resources. I mean, I'm sure Jay has tons and tons of stuff. I mean, I don't know him that well, but from what I've seen, like the 10 golden rules are great. And people like him you can trust, be like, well, what do I do? So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And I'm always happy, if anyone who wants to can reach out for me. I'm always happy to kind of spec or scope projects on, on spec, or just like, hey, if you've got a strategy and you're working with a writer, what do we do? I'm happy to kind of help troubleshoot. But the point is, work with other people. Don't solve this on your own. And if you do those 5 things, if you find your principles, you find your standards, you find you have habits over goals, you find right people, and you should avoid the suffering that inflicts so many writers, lawyers. That's that. I hope that wasn't too fast or too slow, but that's my bet.
It was super fast, but I think that's always good to keep the energy up on a
Yeah, I mean,
Zoom.
I can take much longer to answer stuff.
Yeah.
But I just I wanted to I didn't want to, I want to make sure Audrey gets plenty of time to do her thing and answer questions. So
Yeah. I'm gonna give you a couple trick questions before we go to Audrey.
I love
Um,
it. Love a trick
so
question.
what would you say, one of the things you mentioned that's really awesome is that great writing is going to create the know, like, and trust.
Yes.
And, that's kind of a cliche, but if you think about it, right, when people come to the website, they've got to, they've got to get to know the attorney. They've got to make a selection. When we were chatting before this, we talked about AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action, the AIDA formula. So it's like they've got to get to your website, they've got to see the images, they've got to read the copy, and they've got to decide, like, okay, I get it. These guys are local. I kind of like them. I could trust them, and I'm going to give them a call. What's the magic in communicating know, like, and trust?
It's a great question. It really cuts to the quick. And I think it's similar to the web design stuff. And really what it is humanity or kind of radical empathy, which is ultimately, we're communicating through these weird random things. We're on Zooms, we're like, whatever. And, but ultimately we're creatures. We evolved in like we're cave people, with a close group of people. And what in order to like instigate that feeling of, oh, you're a part of my tribe, you really need to care. And one of my business mentors had this idea: first them, then you. So it's like if you constantly think about your writing, okay, I'm trying to help someone with like a tax problem, or like they've been injured in a motorcycle accident. Okay, well, you know, what do they need to know? What are they feeling? What are they scared about? And really care about the results. I think that's ultimately, if you comes from a place of like, I'm a human being caring about another human being in trouble, and I'm going to do what I can, even in this marketing content. Yeah, this marketing content is for me because I'm trying to generate leads in business. But before I can get there, and sure, I would want that, and everyone wants abundance. But before I can get there, I first have to think, God, this person's in trouble. And so if I saw this person in the street, even despite my skills, how would I help them? And if you're constantly thinking, how can I help? How can I be a human being? And first them, then you, then the content's going to fall into place. Yeah, you got to worry about the technicalities, but that's what I would say.
Cool. So you said you were almost a chess master. You beat the the world's junior the U.S. junior chess champion or
No,
something.
I beat Art Bisguer, who was at one point the U.S. champion. I've been really I'm close to becoming a chess master, which is 2,200 rating, and I'm like, if you like, I'm like 19 something, but I feel like I'm playing it very close to there, and I'll beat grandmasters online and things like that.
So I want you to apply your chess master to copywriter, because
Yeah.
and you could tell us we're wrong, but a chess master is thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead.
Mhm.
And it seems like so is copywriting, right? Like you're trying to think about what's in the you said it a minute ago, what's in the person's head, and really
Yeah.
getting into their head. So is there anything you can apply as a chess master to your copywriting, and to recommending for folks what their content should be communicating?
Ooh, cool question. Yes, I will tell you. One of the reasons I love chess versus other games is the rules are very simple. The pieces move in a certain way. There's information's on the board, and then you can get creative within that context. But you have these kind of guardrails. You have these constraints on you. And I think the same thing is true with copyright. It's like a lot of people are like, to be an artist, you have to have like, I want this open sky. I want freedom. But too much freedom. I mean, the brilliant Eastern philosophers will tell you too much freedom is actually a kind of a tyranny.
Sure.
By having these kind of rules, and I mentioned my thing laid out for you about what the copywriting should be and how to be and what it needs to do, it actually opens up creativity, because you're like, well, I have to play within these rules. I need to include these terms. I need to do like, this has to be this long. Our goal is conversion. And in some ways, it's actually way more fun, because once you have that, then you're like, oh, well, within this, I can be creative. So it's the constraints and the science of it that feed the creativity.
Um, One of the challenges people have with copy, or the biggest challenges, thank God we've overcome it through our team,
Yeah.
is the suffering you talked about. And the real suffering I find I struggle with approving copy
Yeah.
for 10 Golden Rules and for our website is the suffer. To me, the suffering is when I read the copy, and if there's one or two little changes, I love it. But if there's so many changes that I feel like I should have written it myself,
Yeah.
that's the suffering for me.
That's suffering. It's
So
awful. Yeah.
how do you how do you avoid that kind of suffering as an attorney, as a content approver?
Well, this is the difficult thing. This is why I've tried to build the business around. There's not one trick, and it's been difficult because when I was writer, just doing my stuff, it was easy because I kind of knew, and trying to scale it and have a team do it for me was more difficult, and especially coaching others. But I would say one of the best ways to do, well, there's a few things, but like having those rules for yourself that I mentioned, like the copy, in other words, copywriting will suck. It will not be approved by me if blah, blah, blah. And you create a list. If it sounds like this, if it does this. And so basically you build kind of institutional knowledge, and it's worth it if you're going to do it a lot. You're like, I don't want my copy to be this. This is an example of good copy. This is an example of bad copy. And so that's really useful. I mean, and the other thing is, this is going to sound, I don't take this the wrong way, but in some ways you have to, it's helpful sometimes to let go of certain standards. It's like action is better than no action where you're procrastinating. Sometimes it's like, good enough has got to be good enough sometimes. And even when I have copy made for my own site, I'm just like, yeah, I wouldn't really write it that way, or it's not perfect, but I'm like, I'm gonna get it out the door, because you're not trying to, like, I feel like it's like some of these people who write one novel and they never write again. It's like, you can't afford to do that in internet marketing. It can't be perfect. You got to be like, good enough. Let's do better next time. Learn from the thing. It can't be put you in danger. You can't write something that's untrue and it's going to get you sued. But you're like, I really don't like the way it was written. And I'm not saying you should hold your content writers to high standards and make them great. But you also have to have this attitude of like, action creates clarity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adam, and stick around because we'll take questions from the attendees in a minute. And we've got a few coming in through the Q&A. So if anyone wants to post in the Q&A, please go ahead. But with that, I'd love to introduce Audrey. And we met through a couple people introduced us. As a matter of fact, today, Jamie Messina was trying to introduce us. So it seems like we travel in the same circles. Just find my notes here. And Audrey's going to do two things for us. First of all, she's going to make sure that she's going to teach us best practices to make sure our website's usable for people with disabilities, visual disabilities, and motion disabilities, even things like using the mouse. And she is an attorney, and she's also an adjunct professor. I don't think I don't know if we can call her technically a professor. She has a real expertise in the advertising laws, FTC requirements, and ADA, which is becoming increasingly important because there's a lot of lawsuits coming up if your website's not ADA compliant. So with that, Audrey, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me today. I really appreciate being here. So basically what I do is I come in after, or hopefully while Jay and Adam are drafting and putting together your website, and I review for legal compliance as they go along. That is absolutely the best way of doing a new website. Of course, doesn't always work that way, but there are ways of fixing websites. So today's presentation is how to protect your own business from your own website, right? So a little bit about me. I'm Audrey Glover-Dichter. I've been a solo practitioner since October 1999. I graduated from the American University Washington College of Law in DC. I'm licensed in Florida, DC, New Jersey, and New York, but it doesn't really matter because what I do is federal law. And doesn't matter where the client is, doesn't matter where I am. Law is the law, and it applies to everybody, as we'll talk in a minute. Per bar rules, here's my disclosure, my disclaimer, actually. Today's presentation is just general legal information. It's not building a attorney-client privilege or relationship by any means. It's not legal advice, all right? So if you have any questions when I'm done, I'm happy to answer them. But if there's something more personal or business oriented, I'd rather keep it offline and discuss it in person. Okay, so websites. Websites must be legally compliant with advertising law, privacy law, ADA online compliance, and of course, intellectual property. So when I review, my main umbrella, as you can see, is advertising, marketing, promotions law. That's where I always start. Websites are technically advertising nationally and internationally. So again, it doesn't matter where you're located, your size, your revenue, your product, your service, what language you're advertising in, your location. If you have a website, you are now technically and legally advertising nationally and internationally. So all these rules apply to you. Websites must be legally compliant before they go live per the FTC laws and rules. And most, if not all, of the federal agencies have advertising laws. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold myself. So most of the federal rules, federal agencies have their own rules on top of every state. Attorney General's office also has rules and regulations for advertising. And there are some local cities like New York City that also does enforce advertising rules, maybe under different names, but they're still doing advertising. So what is advertising? So basically, advertising laws are there to protect consumers from false, misleading, fraudulent advertising. So if you're going to say something about your business, right, you're offering a product or a service, please make sure that you can actually prove what you're saying in your marketing. So that's where I come in. So they, Jay and Adam make it sound awesome and make it look good, but then I come in and make sure that you can actually say what you're saying on your website, right? So we want to make sure we're legally compliant every which way we can. So what needs to be legally compliant with advertising law? Everything. And when I say everything, I truly mean everything. And there's rules for everything. Social media and websites in particular, because we all live online now, more so because of COVID than ever before. If a business gets in trouble, it's usually because of their advertising campaigns on their websites or their social media, or just their online presence. Something went wrong. It is not legally compliant. And that's where the lawsuits come in. Also, you can get warning letters or you can get challenges. But everything and anything online can be challenged and can cause legal issues. So that's why you need to have it reviewed. Using influencers. Oops, sorry. So I'll stay there. But using influencers, a quick version of that is recently one of the Kardashians was an influencer advertising for a crypto company, and she got in trouble and she was fined $2.1 million, which, to most of us, that's a lot of money, for violating advertising rules under the Securities and Exchange Commission. So it wasn't that she got in trouble with the Federal Trade Commission. She was fine with that. I looked at the ad and she was fine with that. She was compliant with that. But nobody bothered taking it to the next level and make sure that she was legally compliant with the SEC and the states. So there's so much more that goes into it. So it depends on your product or your service. It depends how many more rules we need to look at. Cannabis is another really confusing field of advertising, because if you think about it, it's illegal federally, it's fully legal every which way in about a third of the states. Another third of the states is touchy-feely, like in Florida, you need a medical marijuana card from your doctor. And then there's other bunch of states where, no, it's completely legal, period. So how do you advertise? And that's where you need to have an advertising lawyer come in to help you make sure that you're advertising compliant. So when I'm reviewing, I'm also reviewing for intellectual property issues, right? Because what's the point of reviewing a marketing campaign and leaving you hanging with intellectual property problems? This is your typical copyright, trademark, patent, infringements, clearances, and licensing. So do you have something to protect? We go ahead and we protect it. If not, the questions are, do you have the right licensing for the photos, the videos, whatever it is that you're using? Do you have the legal right to use it for commercial purposes? Using it on your website or using it on your PowerPoint, or well, depends on that, right? There's a lot of exceptions to the rules as usual. But yes, there are intellectual property issues, and people actually do get sued by photographers or artists for downloading photos from anywhere on the internet and putting them on the website or putting them on the social media. And guess what? That's illegal. You can't do that. Well, you're infringing. It's the point. So again, intellectual property laws apply to all businesses, regardless of size, revenue, product, service, language you're advertising in your location. So your website also must, and I say must, be legally compliant with privacy laws. You need privacy policy, terms and conditions or terms of use, cookie policy, and a banner, disclaimers, disclosures, and your cybersecurity on the back end. So can you copy and paste privacy policies and terms and conditions and disclaimers and disclosures and all this legal language from anywhere else? I highly recommend against it. The point of having these documents is that they're legally binding contracts, and they're there to protect your business. So if you're copying and pasting from somewhere else, like a lot of people like to copy and paste from Google, well, you're not protecting yourself. You're not Google. So the point is, what's in your privacy policy, what needs to be written inside your privacy policy, right? So that's why it takes a lot of work to draft these documents, because you want to make sure they're legally compliant, but also you're protecting the business, especially the terms and conditions. Again, that's another binding contract. So if somebody lands on your webpage and does something hurtful or wrong or wrongdoer, then depending on what terms and conditions or your terms of use say, then what can you do to protect your business, or what can you do against that one person, right? So they're legally required. Different laws have, different restrictions, and nowadays we have a major blending of privacy laws. So the question is not what do you do, what does your website say, but it's the who that lands on your website that determines your privacy law compliance levels. If you're in e-commerce, all the more reason. If you're working with clients from abroad, trust me, you need to be legally compliant with other international laws like the GDPR. And basically, you need to make sure that you're legally protecting all the personal identifiable information, that's the PII, that you collect on your websites. Everybody's collecting something. And the more you collect, like if you allow people to fill out forms like Jay was talking about, or even better, if you put a button there for payment, well, guess what? Now your website is collecting even more information and sharing it with third parties. So you have to be legally compliant with all that information. You have to protect it in the back end, which is where your cybersecurity comes in. And you have to let everybody know, right? What are you collecting? Why, where, who you're sharing it with, how it's protected. And on the CCPA, soon, CPRA is coming into effect on January 1st with a look back of 2022. So enforcement starts immediately. And they want to know, what are you doing under these rules to protect even more personal information being collected? So territorial scope may differ, but let me tell you, there's a major blend of laws now. We don't have federally a GDPR wannabe. But the states, because the federal government is not taking it upon themselves to do something all encompassing, right? The states are doing their own. And obviously California, New York, Colorado, and several other states have their own rules. And if you're doing business in those states, those rules are going to apply to you because you're doing business with those people that live in those cities, in those states. So age of consent, that becomes a major issue. So that's why when I'm reviewing, I'm asking, who's your target audience? And is there a possibility that kids can get involved in this? And that's where we really need to be very careful, because there's a whole other set of rules for kids. And it depends on the age too. So let's talk about ADA online compliance. So the ADA online compliance, like Jay was talking about, it has a lot to do with people with disabilities. Now, the law itself does not have, it came into effect 30 years ago. So obviously this is way before we were online. So, but the Justice Department did give us guidance recently as to the do's and don'ts. And some of it is pretty basic, like contrast, coloring, but the most important thing is, like, for example, be careful if you're going to use if you're going to use a widget. There's a lot of companies that offer you a widget as opposed to working with tech people, like maybe Jay's company may have somebody in the back end who could go and fix your back end to be legally compliant. All right. So what are we looking for? Most people under the ADA who are navigating the websites are using, a lot of them are using what's it called, they're using help, right? So they have their own software that works with the websites. And if they can't navigate through your website, then that becomes an issue, not just for that person, but it opens your business up for litigation. There's been a lot of litigation in this particular field. And the bottom line is, yes, there's a lot of, depends on which federal circuit you're in, it depends on the state. Bottom line is, be legally compliant, all right? So the other thing is, you got to keep in mind is, for example, I had a client, very, very, very small business on one of the big e-commerce platforms. And the reason why this person picked that e-commerce platform is because they promised her that it was going to work with this widget, right, to be ADA online compliant. Well, she got sued anyway, because when the software updated, they turned off, and nobody noticed this, right? So when the ADA compliant widget updated, it turned off the sound. So people who are deaf could not hear their screen readers, that's what they usually use, to listen, navigating through the website. So she got sued by a deaf person because the website was not ADA online compliant. If you're a lawyer, I'm sure you can figure out that there's so much wrong with that. But that's how it happens. So can you rely just on one thing? And so here's the thing about websites. My key takeaways. Your websites and social medias are the leading causes for legal challenges, such as warning letters from federal agencies, letters from state attorney general's offices, lawsuits from consumers, from the FTC, the SEC, pick one, okay? So if you get a warning letter, a challenge letter, or lawsuit, call an advertising law attorney, because not all attorneys are going to be able to understand like this field of law, right? Because there's a reason why you're getting these based, and that they're strictly based on your advertising and marketing. Prevention and due diligence costs a lot less than getting sued. So highly recommend spending money on legal compliance, and make sure that you keep your websites legally compliant. plug it and forget it no longer works. The law is a living thing. And as the law changes, your websites have to be legally compliant on the back end as well. So as advertising law changes, you need to make sure that your websites are compliant with that. Same thing with IP. If you're going to be using different pictures throughout, your posts or your blogs, then you need to make sure that that's done correctly. And the privacy laws, those are changing constantly. So here's why you need to have your websites checked quarterly, at least, in order to be legally compliant. And the ADA compliance, it's like really what I do is I work with the tech team and I translate like the legal jargon into what they can understand, what needs to be done in the back end to help you legally be compliant. Is it ever 100%? No, of course not. But you have to be as legally compliant as you can. So that's where all of this applies to every business, regardless of product, service, revenue, size, location, language. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to leave you with this one since you both do work with lawyers. There is a case that a lawyer in New York actually got in trouble with the Federal Trade Commission first. And because he got in trouble with the Federal Commission first, then the New York State Bar went after him. And he was advertising fraudulently that he went to NYU, New York University, when he in fact had a degree from New York Law School. Anybody from New York? I'm sure you understand the major difference between NYU and New York Law School. So he was misleading, fraudulently advertising on his website that he graduated from NYU when he in fact did not. And all these complaints went into the Federal Trade Commission. He got sued by the Trade Commission, and then that went into the New York State Bar, where he had to obviously answer to them. So I'll leave you with that little tidbit to think about. And if you want to contact me to make sure that your website is legally compliant, this is how you can find me. You can send me an email, you can call me. You also can reach me on LinkedIn, and you will see, I will send you, actually, hold on a second. And you can
Actually,
see-
Audrey, if you don't mind, if you send us the slides, we'll share them with everybody. Well, thank you so much. That was really great. First and foremost, I mentioned this off the top. You've got to design your websites so that people with disabilities can use them. But there's definitely a lot of the folks out there looking for websites that are not ADA compliant and pursuing these lawsuits. So what would you say are like the top 3 things that you've got to do to ensure that you're not at risk of one of these lawsuits?
Well, again, it's kind of hard because the first things that they're always looking. So what they do is there's certain law firms that only focus on this, right? And that's all they do. And they have an army of people. So every month they'll say, okay, this month we're going to do e-commerce and we're going to look at all the dresses, small stores on e-commerce. So they'll start combing through those. And then like this poor woman who called me, she was doing the right thing by relying on this widget being sold by this e-commerce platform. Nobody noticed. Oops. That's where the technicalities come in. You need to be on top of it, right? So, for example, if I'm doing legal compliance for every quarter, I'm running my own tests to make sure they're up and they're running and they're compliant. If I find something's wrong, or I know that some things need to be updated because the law just changed, I will go ahead and tell the client, you need to fix X, Y, and Z because, right? And then how much is that?
So I'm going to be hard on you.
What?
Okay, if we can't or don't hire Audrey, what are the top 3 things someone should look out for to make sure they're ADA compliant?
Well, again, contrast is always a good one. because you want to make sure that contrast and fonts are readable. Sound, please. Sound is always important. And for those people who are deaf also, every video needs to have the closed caption. Please make sure it's correct. Don't just rely on whatever. Sometimes, you know, you use some that are not really great.
Yeah.
And make sure the closed captions, if you're going to do different languages, that they're in the proper language and, you know, and they are readable. Disclaimers, disclosures, don't hide them. Please make them visible, make them obvious. If you hide them, you're running the risk of, you know, getting sued. Did that answer
Awesome.
your question?
Thank you. All right. Well, we've got some questions, and if anybody wants to ask questions on the Q&A or the chat, please go ahead. I've got a few come in on the private chat. So I guess the first one will go back to Adam, and I might take a crack at this too.
Sure.
What's the general rule on how much content to write for a website? Is it possible to write too much content? What's your boundary around quantity?
Ooh, fantastic question. Do you have thoughts? I mean, I'm happy to expound.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, this is a great, I mean, again, back to your purpose. I have my one client who writes hundreds of thousands of pages a month. I mean, words a month. Some who do like 1 or 2 posts. I think part of it is like, how is it plugging in and playing with the rest of your marketing? As a general rule, if the content is for high quality, like the more you add, the merrier. I mean, I know this is a thing. The limit is basically your own internal resources because it takes energy to create content. But if the content's great, there's no reason not to add as much as you want. It's just a matter of like, you know, you have limited resources in this world and in your business. And so you want to spend them as efficiently as possible. And so the question is, how do we measure efficiency? It depends on like, you know, your business goals and like what your budget is. But I would just say, I always opt to this, especially if you're a relatively small firm, opt small. You know, as one of these, Jim Collins, I think the business strategist said, fire bullets, then cannonballs. Make sure it works in small before blowing like thousands of dollars on it. Or tens of thousands. Was that help?
Yeah, no, that's great. Look, first thing I would say, you know, having done this for many years now, like 19 years, more content is better than less content. And I know that sounds obvious, but you know, we kind of have a standard plan we have for some smaller law firms where we do 1 piece of content a week, you know, 4 articles a month.
Yeah.
And that works pretty good. Like we can improve SEO. But some of our clients sign on for a little bit more aggressive plan with 10 pieces of content, and it works better. I mean, I could quantify it, but I'm just saying, like, having looked at hundreds of reports, every month we look at the SEO report, every month we look at the traffic report, every month we look at the pages that are actually getting the traffic. And one of my old SEOs used to say, a rising tide floats all boats. So if you write 10 pieces of content, it's going to affect the first 4 positively. We have another client that's doing 60 pieces of content. I looked at their numbers last week. Their SEO is up 449% in the past 12 months.
It just works, and it's what is a shame because I feel like it shouldn't. I feel like there's some. It's like, but it's just like a war out there, and it's like it's World War I. It's like the more just throwing in. I mean, will this last forever? I don't know. But right now, it's like the more you throw out there, the better. And it's like I feel like because sometimes I've written some pieces of content, I'm like, this is a gem. Like I want to, you know, it's just not enough to do one thing. It's consistency over time.
But I would put a huge asterisk on that.
Okay.
It's not, you know, 2012, where in 2012, it was all about lots of content. We were getting tons of volume written overseas, and it wasn't particularly great content. But Google's had a couple major initiatives, and we've talked about it on the SEO webinar, which you can find on our YouTube page. You know, Google's had a couple updates, including Panda and BERT, that are specifically looking at the quality of the content. So don't misunderstand that, you know, 10 pieces of, you know, content written overseas or lower quality content is not better than 4 quality pieces of content. So you've got to, you know, gauge your budget, and you got to write extremely high quality. And
100%.
you know, the one guideline on quality is, you know, write for humans. Don't write Don't write for SEO anymore. So don't be jamming in a bunch of keywords. Remember, we used to see copy on websites. It was like, we're an internet marketing agency that does SEO for websites for law firms. And we do tons of pay-per-click and SEO and search engine optimization because
Yeah.
we're an internet marketing agency.
And we're in
You'd
internet marketing
find that
in
stuff and it was
Florida.
like,
Yeah, exactly.
what? And that was written for SEO because we used to include 3 keywords, 3 or more times on the page. So clearly that is not the way to go today. It's high quality content written for humans. And the other guideline we give is answer questions. And we do a lot of work
And that goes-
identifying the questions that companies are getting asked and answering those questions in the form of video and blog content on websites.
Mhm.
We shoot a lot of videos with our clients where they do Q&A, and I've talked a lot about this on other webinars. We answer the questions. What do I do if I was in a car accident? I got hit by an Uber, and we literally answer the question by including the question in the answer. So we asked the attorney to say, tell a little story. And last week a woman was in my office and she said, what do I do? I was in a car accident. I was hit by an Uber. And we literally get the question in the answer, in the video, in the transcription of the video, in the description of the video. On the blog, we describe the question and the answer. We explain what's in the video in the blog post that the video is contained on the page. And that's the sort of supercharged SEO of today.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that. And the one thing I would add to that is that, like, in addition to answering questions, it's like the specificity is really useful, because if you like the Uber thing versus how to make it in an accident, it's like you're trying to think of what I try and do when I ideate is like specific questions that like people are going to have, but maybe, or scenarios that are not necessarily overly like, what do I do after a car accident? There's like a trillion articles written about that, but like, what do I do if my a dog bit my kid, but it belongs to like a really close neighbor? Do I have to sue this person? So scenarios that are like going to happen that may not be like, they're more like long tail things, but that are really happening. And it comes back again to what you're saying, writing for humans. Because if you think what Google wants to serve up the absolute best results so that you keep using Google and you don't switch to Bing. And the way they do that is like they want their whole algorithm is designed to like ranking content towards being, I love it. Thank you, Google. You gave me the right answer.
And Adam, you jumped in, Audrey. I think you had an answer too.
Yes. Well, that takes me to plug it and forget it is long gone. So, the more you post, the better off you are. So the question is, do I have any rights when it comes to protecting the content I write and post on my website, social media, or videos I post on YouTube? Okay, so yes. The Copyright Office within the last year or so recently gave us new rules where we can put together X amount of blogs to protect them as a copyright. So, and instead of having to pay for certain, you couldn't really protect a blog or your website pages, but now if you put it together in a package of perhaps 15, 20, it depends on what you're trying to protect. It depends how many for one fee. So yes, now you can protect that. Also, like I do for everything that I do, it's my work, right? So I put the little C for copyright because it is an automatically protection. It's an automatic protection for copyright, right? The person who creates it, it is automatically protected once the person is done creating it, right? So I used my little C, and then you can put together a group. Like I could put my slides and I could go and I could ask for copyright protection as a group, right? So you could definitely do that. Trademark, obviously you can trademark a brand name, you can trademark a logo, and you can trademark your web, your saying, like Nike says, just do it, right? So your tagline. So you can trademark those. So it depends on what you're trying to protect. Make sure you're using the right symbol, either the little C or the TM. And if it's already protected for the TM is for trademark, go to the R. So there's different symbols, but yes, there is protection. That's common law protection. But if you really want to be protected, you need to file it.
Adam, next question's for you. How do you feel about AI being used for content on a website? A lot of buzz about Jarvis AI that can actually write website content.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my philosophy of like what you just expressed is kind of my philosophy, which is like the creating for people. And you know, short answer, I don't think it's going to be very successful. I mean, because it's not really filling in. You can't. This is not one of those things you can outsource. Or you can create in this way. I mean, if it's something, I'm generally skeptical of AI. Across the board. I don't think we're gonna have self-driving cars. I mean, we have some, but it's gonna be special use cases. I think it's gonna be useful for finding patterns, for playing chess. There's a great AI chess program, but that's because the rules are very narrow and constrained. For something like copy, how are you gonna? So you've been injured in a motorcycle accident, right? My leg is broken. I'm crying. My spouse is like freaking out about the bills. I'm gonna go and like a bot is gonna be like, you have your leg broken. Step one is call you're not gonna want to listen to a bot. You want a human being on the line. Like it's just like how do you want to call you have a problem with your phone bill? Do you want to talk to an automated person or do you want to talk to a representative? You're hitting I want the representative now. I don't want to be with a bot. And it's the same thing. You're in an emergency situation for most of these things, or like I'm being sued because I didn't have the right copyright protection on my website. I want to talk to Audrey. I don't want to talk to a bot. And I think it's the same thing true with this. Like, yeah, maybe there's some special uses. Maybe it could be like a centaur thing where you have really talented writers using AI to write some copy and then you edit the AI. I don't know. I don't think I'm not worried that Virtuoso is going to be run out of on a rail because of these AIs. But come back to me in 5 years. I'm going to be like a line cook for the AI bots, like in their cyber kitchens.
Audrey raised her hand. Please. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I got a pitch in. I'm sorry, guys. But first of all, there is no intellectual property protection for anything created by a computer, an AI, anything that's not a human. There's case law on that. So why would you want to do that to yourself? Number one. And number two, the AI, the computer, is still a machine and it is only as good as the human who created it. Personally, that AI may be a learning machine, but you're never going to get the quality and the legal compliance needed from a machine, at least not now, right? Maybe we'll evolve to that point, but right now, you still need to have human eyes on everything, especially when it comes to legal. You want to make sure, because that one word, believe it or not, that one word could throw everything into a loop-de-loop with a lawsuit. Whether it's on your packaging, how much sugar, or natural. Really? Is it natural? That one word can cost you a major lawsuit that could potentially, shut you down.
But I mean, I feel like with the use cases like the chats you're mentioning, Jay, where like rather than like, okay, I could have no chat or I could have an AI chat. Absolutely. I mean, and if it works, it works. But I feel like in specific small use cases, they're useful. But I think in terms of generating content as a general rule, I don't know. Do I do AI content versus no content at all? I know you'd have to test.
Personally,
Google's actually
I like talking to my clients. So,
the
I
new
like that human connection.
The new Google algorithm is actually written to identify and penalize AI content. So it's actually called the helpful update. So as I was saying earlier, write for people, be helpful, answer questions, and because it's the helpful update, we call it Saint Bernard, because that's the most helpful animal we could come up with. And a lot of the Google algorithms were named after animals. The first one was called Panda, and then Penguin and Cheetah. So we call this one Saint Bernard. One more good question. How long does web development take from start to finish? Adam, I don't know if you want to take a shot at that. I'm sure you've written brand new website content.
Well, I mean, I only do the it's like just hires. We're just content. So I don't. There's so many pieces of web development. If you want to do good content, several weeks. It depends. Like again, when I'm working with like a small firm or one that's rolling out a site, I'd say just get the essential pieces up there content wise, and then you can always add more because action creates clarity. You want to get that stuff out there. So instead of trying to build out 50 pages, which could take months, let's get your about us, your homepage, your practice areas, all the legal stuff that Audrey said, get that stuff up there and then add more. And if you're going to work with a content team, that's good. It shouldn't be more than a few weeks. Some people can go faster. But keep in mind that with all these projects, and I'm sure there's for all the other pieces of the website development, it's always going to take longer than you think. There's always going to be little things that pop in. You're like, oh, this got delayed. Da, da, da. So, just budget in that intellectually, or just know that.
So I showed a bunch of the great new websites we've done for law firms early in my slides, and I think the two, I'll give you the two extremes as my answer. So with a little premium that a client paid to get a website up really fast, we actually got it done in 2 months, which is like a crazy record. And the biggest thing we'll always say from the agency side is it's client approvals that cause the most delays. And, obviously, as we talked about earlier, if it's suffering content that the client looks at it and like, oh my God, I got to completely rewrite it, but generally we've been very successful writing content that the clients come back with just a couple little sort of format changes. So then those approvals can move real quick. And then the longest, we were about 1.5 years for an international brand that was done in 14 languages in 20 plus countries. And it was just a massive project with cross-functional teams working from all these countries to adapt the content, not only to languages, but also to cultural differences. And it's just a massive undertaking. And that took about 1.5 years. So, it can get done quickly. And by the way, that 2-month website was a pretty basic site. It was like a 10 to 20 page, what we call brochure site. So if you're building technology and you're building functionality, like, obviously every website today has forms. They can collect contact information and basic, chat. Those are low tech that come with a brochure website. But if you're building actual functionality, that's a longer. I'm going to take one last question. Then I have a trick question for you guys. Gregory Sandler, thanks for being here. Would you please elaborate on the pros and cons of a video blog versus a written blog from the standpoint of readership and from SEO? How are they used together? That was my kind of theory. Do you guys want to take that, or you want me to go?
I mean, you're going to know more than this. Like, I don't do video, but I'm actually just curious what I would defer to you.
Yeah. So we use it in a complementary manner, Gregory. So we ask and answer questions. We work with the attorneys, we rehearse, and then we go live with the video to ask and answer questions in the content. And the reason I sort of skipped over it, the reason why we're answering questions is because essentially when you grab this device, you grab your phone and you're asking a question, or if you ask Siri, you're literally asking questions when you do searches. They're called, Google's called them search queries, but essentially, we're doing Google searches because we're looking for information we don't have. We're essentially asking questions. So when you literally write the answer to the question, you include the question and the answer to the question in a video, and then post that video on YouTube, and then search engine optimize it by using the title, the question, the blog, the description, the keywords in YouTube. You're search engine optimizing for YouTube. Google owns YouTube, so you're addressing a Google property with an SEO initiative. Then you're going to take that question and answer video. You're going to copy the embed code and use that on your blog, and then you're going to write copy around describing what is answered in the question in the video, so that you're further search engine optimizing with additional words that are describing that video and explaining the question and the answer. We have used this for more than 5 years, and it's extremely successful. And as I mentioned before, the guys who are doing 4 do well. for a month, one a week. The guys who are doing 10, doing a little bit better, and the guys who are doing 60 pieces a month are up 449%. Now it's not just because there's 60 pieces of content. There's a significant amount of we call it the ABCs of SEO. There's a significant amount of architectural work going on the website, a significant amount of backlinks, links to the website being built from other websites to the website, and then finally the content piece. So it's not simply like write 10 blogs and your SEO is going to improve. It's very competitive, particularly in legal, and it's very active. So with that, let me hit my my trick question, and then we'll wrap up. And frankly, this has been a trick question for me for years. I finally think I have an answer. I'll give you my answer. But if you're designing a website or you're designing a page for attorneys, and I'm going to use the example of a car accident lawyer. Should you show a car accident? Should you show a big check amount? Should you show a courtroom? Should you show the law firm? Or should you show, I was looking at a website this week that had boxing gloves and a fighter, and then there's the brand, the Hammer, across the country. So, the question is, should you show a car accident? Should you show a law firm? Should you show a courtroom? Should you show a big check amount? Or should you show a fighter? Adam, you can go first.
Okay. I mean, my weasel answer is depends on the firm and their brand. What are they about? They whatever Stewart, Serious Stewart. I like big Serious Stewart, in that case. I mean, riffing on top of my head, I don't like the idea of showing an accident. Someone's been traumatized by a car accident. They're like, oh my God, I don't want to see that. It's like you've been stabbed and here's a guy with a knife. So I would say that would be out. The courtroom is a little generic. The dollar signs, you're going to attract clients that are going to be like, bottom, not bottom, I want to say bottom of the barrel. It's like, do you really want people who are like, their whole thing is, I want money? They're going to be annoying. For my firm, but again, I feel like it depends on the thing. I would say, give me the fighter. I want someone who's going to put up a fight, who's going to, defend me because I'm now weak because of my accident. I want someone who's going to fight for me. But that, again, that's just my intuition, and Audrey, I don't know if that's universal.
That's a great answer. Audrey, you want to take a crack at this one?
Well, as a lawyer, my favorite answer is, again, it depends. So my question is, what exactly are you advertising?
Right.
So I agree with a lot of what Adam said. And really and truly, if you're advertising a law firm, focus on your law firm, focus on your business, build your brand is the point, but do it legally compliant so you can build that trust. Because again, people do business with people who they like and trust. And what is it that they like, they know, and they trust, right? So I would build your brand and build that trust by being legally compliant, because if your brand gets in trouble with the bar, with the federal agency, a state agency, or whatever it may be, or a lawsuit, then there goes the trust, right?
Well, I think you guys both hit on what I would say is the correct, what I'm learning is the correct answer, that for each firm, there is no correct answer, and that your brand messaging has to be consistent with your brand message. And so there's an expression of, I actually liked your Socrates quote about knowing thyself.
Yeah.
And so you have to know your why. There's a great TED Talk video about your why, but and a lot of attorneys have a why, that they're one of our longtime clients, his mother had multiple sclerosis and his dad had some workplace injuries, and both of them got very little compensation from the insurance. And then his first job, he was an insurance attorney, and they're like, okay, your whole job is just to reject any claims. He's like, oh, now I understand my horrible poverty based life. And so he became a personal injury attorney to fight for the rights of others. And so a lot of the PI attorneys and a lot of attorneys in general have a reason why they selected their practice area.
Yeah.
So, know your brand, know your why, and communicate that. And for the guys who are fighters, I think it's okay to say you're a fighter. And for the guys who are, who are going to be settling a lot of cases, it's okay to show a check, because yeah, they're going to get the folks who want money, and your brand is going to be appropriate to different kinds of people. As I said earlier with my example, that some people watch video and some people read copy and some people do chat. Different people have different goals, and they're going to use the website differently. So be true to yourself, be true to your brand. And I think that would be my answer. Final answer.
Yeah, authenticity. I mean, I think that's ultimately probably both from design point of view, even from the legal compliance point of view. It's like trying to be like an authentic person in a weird artificial space of the web, and just be like, I'm here to help you. Yeah, I've got a business to run, but ultimately I'm here to serve you. And like thinking of it in those terms helps with the compliance, helps with the design, etc.
True.
Awesome.
Agree
Well, you
with
guys
that.
were great. Thank you so much. We'll send out a copy of this recording to everyone who's here.
Thank you.
And you can always find these recordings on the 10 Golden Rules YouTube channel. Adam and Audrey, thank you so much. And just thank you for being here.
Been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
for having us.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.